The Minnesota Wild follow up the game of the year with a great example of what happens when you don't put away your opponent.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
Hey, this is Marcus Foligno, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Seth Toupal. Welcome to Locked On Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Locked On Wild is your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms if you have not already, so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we will break down arguably the game of the year for the Minnesota Wild against the Colorado Avalanche, a 3-2 win in a shootout. And we'll talk about the letdown game against the Buffalo Sabres, which also ended 3-2 in a shootout. And we'll look at the current positioning for the Minnesota Wild and the work that they did to get back into a playoff position over the last month. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, covering the Minnesota Wild over the last 5 seasons and providing credentialed insider access for the Minnesota Wild over the last 5 seasons. So, couple of different games to dive into here for today's episode. And let's just start with what I'm going to bill as the game of the year. Wild Avs. It was a very much publicized matchup between the two teams. Avs coming in with just 1 loss in regulation. Minnesota Wild, all the work that they had done, and they weren't able to even gain a point on the Colorado Avalanche over the span that they had been playing lately. And the game lived up to the hype. It absolutely lived up to the hype. Great chances for both sides, great goalie play for both sides, and the Minnesota Wild end up with a 3-2 shootout win. Now, a couple of things from this game that I really liked, and let's start with Jesper bleepin Wallstedt. That's the first thing. That's the first takeaway from the game against the Avalanche. He was sensational. He made big save after big save. And you look at the 2 goals that the Avalanche scored. Number 1 was just a disgusting move by Nathan MacKinnon. And the second goal was right up in front on a Kaprizov-like pass from MacKinnon to Gabriel Landeskog. And he was able to find enough room past Jesper to get the goal. Hard to defend those types of shots. And so, I think that was one of those situations where the Avs kind of earned those goals, so to speak. It wasn't any sort of particularly poor play by by Jesper on those goals. It just was a good example of the Avs kind of doing what they needed to do to get a couple of goals in. And you look on the other side, and what do the Minnesota Wild need in games like this? Well, you need your best players to step up. And Kirill Kaprizov with a couple of goals to not only get the game tied at the point that he scored the first, but to give the Wild the lead that they held until into the third period. And you get Kirill Kaprizov stepping up and contributing goals there. You get Matt Boldy with the shootout winner. It seems like Boldy always has an impact, whether it's on the score sheet during the game or coming up clutch, as we'll talk about in the Buffalo game, coming up with a clutch shootout goal to, either extend the shootout or to win it outright. It featured everything that you would be looking for from the Minnesota Wild. There is one player that I really want to key in on in particular. That, of course, being Yakov Trenin. I thought he had one of those really step up and be noticeable type games against the Avs. With Marcus Foligno out of the lineup, somebody needed to step in to kind of fill that role with that beef. And I thought Trenin did a really good job of that. He had he finished with 6 recorded hits, but he also had an assist. He had a handful of shots on goal. He had a couple of blocks as well. And with Foligno out, we're kind of looking as to who was going to step up and fill that spot. And I thought Trenin did a great job of that. He had that bone crusher hit on Cale Makar during the game. And I was really impressed with what Trenin was able to do. I know he has taken a fair share of criticism over his Minnesota Wild tenure because it kind of feels like he's I've used the term redundancy. Feels like he is kind of a copy of Marcus Foligno. Now we have kind of seen him be able to step into that role when Foligno's out. The Wild did get Ryan Hartman back in the game against the Avs, and I thought Hartman was noticeable as well. Did a good job of kind of slotting back into the lineup, providing offense. He had an assist in the game. Just able to fill one of those spots that have been occupied by AHL guys as of this moment. But the big thing to pull from that game, which makes the game against the Avs so exciting and makes the game that we're going to talk about here against Buffalo in a second that much more frustrating, is this notion of answering the bell. Answering the bell, stepping up, and being ready for your opponent. Big game at home, and it lived up to the billing. I mean, it was just opportunities back and forth, and it was good plays defensively, good shots, good shot opportunities by different players on the ice. It seemed like both teams had plenty that was cooking against the other throughout the course of the game. I do have some stats that I want to throw at you for the Avs game. Just some unbelievable numbers defensively that we have seen in those in the game. Courtesy of Dylan Laux, friend of the show. Here's what he had to say, especially on defense. On 20 rush attempts by the Colorado Avalanche top line of McKinnon, Nietzsche, and Lehkonen and or Landeskog. So the top 4 players basically for the Avs. On 20 rush attempts by the Colorado Avalanche top line, Jonas Brodin and Brock Faber were on the ice for 16 of them. 14 of those rushes ended up with no shots on goal. So 20 rush attempts by the Avs, 14 of them out of the 16 that Jonas Brodin and Brock Faber were on the ice, 14 of them led to no shots on goal. That's a lockdown D pair right there. And the numbers have been great from a goals perspective for Jared Spurgeon and Jake Middleton. We'll talk about those coming up in a second because there was a streak that came to an end against Buffalo. But then Jesper Wallstedt, 7-0-2, leads the NHL in save percentage at .938, goals against average at 1.93. Just tremendous work for Jesper. And, he celebrated again against the Avs, celebrated after stopping Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar back-to-back. You're dang right, I would celebrate too. Well, apparently that rubbed the Avs broadcast crew the wrong way. It was brought to my attention that the Avs radio crew said, and Jesper celebrates like he just won the Stanley Cup, which he didn't. I mean, we don't have to fun police it. I know that's a lot of heat of the moment stuff after a very hard fought game between the two teams, and you came up on the wrong end of it. The Avs I will be shocked if the Avs don't get a couple of regulation wins against the Wild this season. The margins are close. We talked about it leading up to the game. The margins between the two are close. The Wild skated right with them throughout the course of the game. Will that be the case every game? Absolutely not. So, it's one of those things like we don't have to suck all the joy out of the game. Avs fans probably didn't know that is how Jesper is celebrated every time he has won in the shootout. And is it a little more than you see from other goalies? Sure. But did he also go through quite a path to get to this point? Yes, he did. So I say celebrate on. If it was Scott Wedgwood celebrating the same way, wouldn't bother me in the slightest. That's just me, though. Wouldn't bother me in the slightest if Wedgwood was celebrating during a shootout, because I just am somebody that I just believe if you're going to celebrate, if you're going to have fun playing the sport that you play, celebrate all you want. I don't care if you dance right on the middle of the ice at Grand Casino Arena after a shootout win as the opponent. You've earned it. So it doesn't bother me, but I'm sure that'll be talked about. I'm trying to work that into the national show for Tuesday. Let me know in the comments what you think. Did that rub you the wrong way? Is it a nothing burger? I just was like, just let him celebrate. It was a big win. He's a young goalie. We don't need to take all the joy and fun out of the sport of hockey. We don't have to we don't need to go unwritten rules. Don't step on the foul lines during a baseball game. We don't have to go that far. Just enjoy the win. Celebrate. It's a hard game. It's a hard-fought game, and the Wild deserve to win it. I could not have been happier with what we saw in that game. It seemed like everybody was amped up for it, ready to rock, stepped up from the moment the puck was dropped. It was a really, really good way to kind of finish off a full day of Black Friday festivities, which is what makes today's game all the more frustrating. But it is a good example that the Wild saw as to what happens if you play with your food instead of eating it. So we'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Monarch. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. And with margins starting to shrink, it is comforting to know exactly where every single dollar is going, and Monarch puts it all in one easy-to-navigate command center, control room. You can see where every single cent of your money is going and make it optimized to fit your budget. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to today's edition of Locked On Wild. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day, and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So let's talk about the Buffalo game. The Wild lose that game in very disappointing fashion by a score of 3-2 in a shootout. Now, I'm not going to steer the bus off the deep end or anything, but it is a letdown game. We don't have to sugarcoat it. It's a letdown game after a huge emotional lift after the win against the Avalanche. Was it potentially? Honestly, I'm not surprised it happened, considering the amount of effort and emotion that went into the game against Colorado. Second night of a back-to-back. There are certainly schedule loss elements about it, but it also gives a really good reminder of what happens when you don't put your opponent away in those types of situations. The Wild had a 2-1 lead, kind of a weird goal for the first goal that they scored, that the Sabres scored. And then the second goal was even weirder. A puck that hit off the wall behind the net, kicked all the way over the top of the net. And as Matt Zuccarello was going to retrieve it, it hit off of him in for an own goal. But that's what undersells the point. That's the key point about the don't play with your food element, is you open yourself up for those types of things to happen. And we have seen this from this Minnesota Wild team throughout the course of the last few years, is sometimes the finishing runs a little hot and cold. The Wild generated tonight a 1.78 expected goals. Now, they did score 2, but if you look at where the shots came from, once again, 36 unblocked shot attempts against the Sabres. 30 of those were low danger, 6 were medium danger, 0 credited high danger looks for the Minnesota Wild against the Sabres. And I think with the way that the Wild were playing, if they continued to force the issue and crash the net, maybe you get one more goal to make it 3-1 instead. It felt like the Wild were one separator goal away from taking care of business in this game and not putting themselves in this situation. But that separator goal never came. And Buffalo got the confidence, they got the weird goals, and they were given a reason to hang around in this game. And that is just, it's like putting your hand into an animal pen and getting surprised when you get bit. You can't be surprised at the results if that's the kind of way that you play. And there just was, it just was one of those games where if you find a little extra to be able to take care of your business, you avoid this situation entirely. Now, defensively, the pairing of Jared Spurgeon and Jake Middleton, 11 previous games that pair had not been on the ice for a 5-on-5 goal against. 9 goals for, 0 goals against in that span. The only defensive pair to not be on the ice for a 5-on-5 goal in the NHL over that 11-game span. Conversely, though, as Dylan Laux mentions, that pairing had the second worst Corsi for percentage in that span at just 41.6%. So almost 60% of the time that the Spurgeon-Middleton pairing is on the ice, they're on the defensive. Yeah, they haven't given up goals, but that is what that Corsi 4 number tells me, is that it was only a matter of time before that was the case. The Buffalo Sabres, by extension, they generated 3.18 expected goals. Now, Philip Gustafsson was good. He saved over 1 goal above expected. And the Wild defensively allowed just 2 high danger attempts for the Sabres throughout the course of the game. But this is why we have said the offense is still work in progress. The top 6 offense has been really good lately. Outside of Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy, it went quiet again. And how about that play by Boldy, though? On that goal that he scored, just going straight up to Alex Tuch, stealing the puck away from him and going to the net and burying one to give the Wild the 2-1 lead at that point. The Wild did not get any other scoring to step up. That has been something that has needed to happen over the course of the season. And if you just get Kirill and Matt Boldy that score, that's probably not going to be enough to win you games. So it's easy to point to what didn't work out in this game tonight. And it's not as though they veered entirely off of what they needed to do. They didn't play great, but it was a winnable game that they just were not able to take care of business in. And it's just a good reminder that if you aren't able to put your opponent away outside of, say, the Nashville Predators at this point, there probably isn't a team in the league that is going to hand the game to you. And even though the Sabres are at the absolute bottom of the standings in the Eastern Conference, they have won 10 total games out of 25. That's not great, but they have beaten other teams. So the Wild become the latest team that they've beaten. It's not a great loss, but it's just use it as a reminder. All the good equity from the Avs game is still there, but use it as a good reminder that you got to take care of business, especially on the second night of a back-to-back. You got to find a way to put your opponent away, or you'll end up in a fight that you didn't expect that you would be in. We'll finish the show today by just taking a look, because we did pass the magic, we passed the magic plateau, where if you're in the playoff chase at Thanksgiving, you usually stay there. So we'll look at where the Central Division standings are right now, what sort of equity the Wild have built up, and we're going to talk about Vladimir Tarasenko as well. He made his return to the lineup, and what a shock. The line combination he was with did not play well. We'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back. There's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. As we mentioned, I got to give myself a little pat on the back for my prediction before Friday's game. Kirill Kaprizov, anytime goal scorer. If you went with that, you had yourself a nice little Friday. And obviously, Kirill and Matt Boldy both scored in the game against Buffalo. Now, if you look at what's next for the Minnesota Wild, they will be heading on the road to take on the Edmonton Oilers, and their porous defense, not great goaltending. So let's run it back. And let's go anytime goal scorer. Let's go Matt Boldy this time. Matt Boldy, anytime goal scorer. If that's your $5 bet, you might have yourself a great day, because right now FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day, and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So let's talk about the return of Vladimir Tarasenko to the lineup. Now, he came in, he went back to the third line. So Danila Yurov continuing to get shifts in the top six, and continuing to just develop and to just really put solid game tape together. He had an assist on the Kaprizov goal for the Wild tonight. How about 18 plus minutes against the Colorado Avalanche? And Yurov was bringing it defensively against the Avs. That was awesome. That was great to see. He got 14, just under 14 and a half tonight. But couple blocks, couple hits, couple shots, just the standard Yurov game log. in the game tonight. Now, Tarasenko, 2 shots on goal, 12 minutes, 40 seconds, played 1 minute, 27 seconds on the second power play unit. And that was it. But I want to just look at the line combinations that Tarasenko was mostly part of. He played 4 minutes, 35 seconds with Liam Ogren, Ryan Hartman, and Tarasenko. And that combination generated a .04 expected goals, .046 expected goals. They had 1 shot on goal in that 4-minute span and 3 shots on goal against. So they had an expected goals percentage of 27.3%. That's not good. Corsi for percentage of 33%. We then saw Yakov, Trenin, Ryan Hartman, and Vladimir Tarasenko. That led to a .07 on ice expected goals for, a goals percentage of 34.5. Now let's look at Ryan Hartman when he did not play with Vladimir Tarasenko, which he actually played with Tarasenko pretty much all night. None of the numbers are good. None of the numbers are good. And if you look at the instances in which Liam Ogren did not play with Tarasenko, those were okay. They were at least better, but just still not great, which leads me back to the point that I just don't think it's a good fit. I don't think what Tarasenko is being asked to do is correct. I don't think what he brings is a good fit. And it's going to be real interesting to see the lengths at which this is allowed to continue, considering how the team is playing right now, considering how well the fourth line of Sturm, Trenin, and Foligno is playing, considering how well the third line, it technically was the third line of Sturm, Foligno, and Trenin. Now that Hartman's back, Hartman played well in the game before Tarasenko came back. Like, it's just we don't have to go down the road of like it's not a good fit. I just don't think it's a good fit. And I think that has a lot to do with the development of Danila Yurov. And we talked about this before the season started. Everydayers will remember vividly. We talked about this as the season was kind of getting going, is there could be a point that comes where Danila Yurov is just a better fit in the top 6, gives you more than what Vladimir Tarasenko has to offer. And I think we've already hit that point. I think there are a couple of different points that the prospects have let us down. Number one, with Jesper Wallstedt. This is a 1A, 1B goalie tandem. This is not a starter backup. And that is 100% because of how Jesper's played. And I think Danila Yurov has worked his way. Now, when Marco Rossi comes back, is there going to be a conversation? Sure. But I think Danila Yurov has worked his way into, if he's on the third line, he at least is the number one fill-in anytime somebody gets injured in the top 6. I just at this point, if Vladimir Tarasenko is not just blistering shots at the net, letting it rip 5-6 shots on goal per game, I don't see the benefit. I really don't. So that's one of my new focuses now as this season unfolds. If he gets on a hot streak, I'll surely back down. But he's got 2 goals in basically 20 games now. That's not nearly enough for what he was brought in to do. Because he's not giving you a defensive checking role. That's not his game. So I don't know. Let's just finish by looking at the standings here. So after the loss, the Minnesota Wild fall to now 8-0-2 in their last 10 games. They have 33 points in 26 games. The Colorado Avalanche have 42 in 25 games. The Dallas Stars have 36 in 25 games as well. The Wild have, at this point, a 6-point lead in the same number of games on the Utah Mammoth. The Utah Mammoth have 27 points. They've also lost 3 in a row. Then it's the Winnipeg Jets, who have 26 points in 24 games. They're 4-6 in their last 10. Chicago's lost 5 in a row. They have 25 points. St. Louis has 25 points. And Nashville has 20. At this point, as far as the standings go for the Central Division, basically the only teams that will be offering any level of pressure for you and the rest of the Central are Winnipeg and Utah. But here's the point to consider for the Winnipeg Jets. How far out of it are they going to be without Connor Hellebuck for 4 to 6 weeks? You know, from the time that injury happened, you're talking, if he's back in 4, which is extremely optimistic, you're a month out. Are you still within striking distance at that point? If it's 6 weeks, they could go on a little bit of a skid here, and they have already started to. The Utah Mammoth red hot start, but they have come back down to the path, and now they have been dealing with some big injuries as well. So it's, the Central Division, the bottom half has kind of fallen out of the Central Division at this point. So who is going to be there to challenge where the Minnesota Wild are at? Now, we've seen injuries in December and January, so let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But at this point, being in a playoff position at the Thanksgiving mark is kind of the quote unquote the official pole position for the NHL season. And the Wilds, after a dismal October, they worked their way back. They got themselves into the 3rd spot in the division. They've built a little bit of equity, but don't squander it. We saw what happened last year. Don't squander it. You got to keep pushing, which is why games like the game against the Sabres is that much more frustrating. You did get a point, but you got to find a way to put the pedal down, put your foot on the throat, and you got to find a way to put those bad teams away. If you don't, every bad team, they're just looking for a reason to hang around. If you give them one, they'll take advantage, and then you look like you did after the game that the Wild had against the Avs. We'll talk more about that Avs game with Alex coming up for Monday's episode, but just want to get some thoughts in. Let's not be fun police about Jesper's celebrations. If you want to be fun police about the weekend after what we saw against Buffalo, I'm not going to stop you. It's, I would hope that there will be a good response against Edmonton on Tuesday. We'll hope for that, and we'll see what happens. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day.